So I think that I finally understand J.D. Vance's path of conversion to Catholicism clearly, and it's all thanks to this incredible article that was published last month that I want to take you through today. It confirms some theories and beliefs that I had developed over the last couple of years and ties some things together in a really, really interesting way. So, welcome to the May Newsroom Analysis. My name is Beck Griffin, and this is the Deep Dive Project, which is my venture in independent citizen journalism and research. The articles that I'm going to be discussing today are linked down below in a source document. Advisory content warning before we get into them. It's inevitable we are going to be discussing topics that some may find disturbing or upsetting, so viewer discretion is advised, and please keep your own mental health forefront at all times. My goal here is to encourage critical thought, inquiry, and a degree of self-education. Please do not use my content as your one-stop shop for information. Please take what I am presenting you with and run with it. Ask your own questions, do your own searches, have your own conversations. That is the only way I truly believe that we are going to gain any type of balance in this world and justice for anyone. We all have to be on board and engaged. So starting with the first article, I'm going to go ahead and go with the one that I mentioned at the top because it is top of mind for me in a big way. This is from a Substack that you should definitely go and support called Dissent in Bloom. And the headline says, J.D. Vance's calculated conversion to Catholicism. Inside his conversion to Catholicism and his entanglement with a powerful Catholic nexus known as Opus Dei. Before he was J.D. Vance, he was James David Hamill. Before that, James Donald Bowman. The name he carries today, he chose himself in 2013, months before graduating Yale, crafting an identity as carefully as any political brand. And a name, as it turns out, was not the only part of his identity that J.D. Vance was willing to shed. In 2019, the former atheist was baptized into the Catholic Church at a Dominican priory in Cincinnati named St. Gertrude's. By the time J.D. Vance arrived on the national stage, very little of the original remained. Peter Thiel gave Vance a job, a philosophy, and millions of dollars. The Catholic Church gave him a name, Augustine, and a priest to baptize him, or probably Augustine. Actually, I think Augustine's the female pronunciation, so Augustine. What both had in common, it turns out, was something older and powerful, a personal prelature of the Catholic Church known as Opus Dei, and a very specific vision for the future of America. Though not a Catholic himself, Thiel became a firm believer in the system after coming under the influence of his Stanford professor Rene Girard. When Girard died, the torch passed from mentor to mentee, and Thiel stepped into the role. Vance would be next. By 2018, Vance had relocated to Cincinnati, joining Revolution LLC as a partner. He had Thiel's philosophy, Thiel's network, and soon Thiel's money. What he didn't yet have was a God. One would soon be arranged for him. And if you're watching on video, there's a fantastic web here that the author included. I really just love a good web, don't you? We've got Opus Dei. From there, it goes down to the Catholic Information Center. We've got Arnie Panula, Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance. It looks like Kevin Roberts. We have mention of Project 2025 by way of the Heritage Foundation. We've got the White House. Again, if you want to look at this in more detail, you can access it linked down below. In 2016, Vance was interviewed by Rod Dreher about his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. And the author notes, this is a memoir that would not exist without Amy Chua, the Yale law professor who took Vance under her wing and pushed him to write it. Chua introduced him to her own literary agent and who Vance explicitly lists as a mentor in the book. Her husband, Jed Rubenfeld, has deep Federalist Society connections that helped Vance's future wife, Usha, in clerkships under Brett Kavanaugh and Chief Justice John Roberts, two of the most powerful conservative judges in the country. Vance also has this couple to thank for something more personal. It was actually Amy who set him up with his future wife. Peter Thiel has a connection here too, as Peter Thiel led the Federalist Society chapter at Stanford. And I just think that is all incredibly interesting and points to the interconnectedness of all of these different entities with their own unique philosophies and viewpoints on life. I think it's probably pretty safe to say that somebody like Kevin Roberts might have a slightly different perspective and outlook on life than somebody like Peter Thiel, yet here they are swimming in the same sort of neoconservative soup, as it were, and working together. And I think that points to something that is critically important to remember whenever we're talking about this network, this system, this conduit, is that it's not one single entity or one single organization pulling the strings and directing everything. It's a living ecosystem of many different parts that are all working together and may have their own goals and reasons for doing so, but nonetheless are in there together. And the reason why it's important to remember that is that it can be tempting. I think it's sort of human nature to want to identify a group by just a single kind of identifying name because it's simple, right? It's simple to just say, oh, it's all the Freemasons, right? It's simple to say, oh, it's all Opus Dei. But in reality, when you actually get into the nitty gritty of it, there are a lot of different elements at play. And Opus Dei is one of them. The Federalist Society is one of them. Peter Thiel is one of them, but they are all unique. And because of that, that gives this entire thing sort of a degree of unpredictability that I think makes it also very, very interesting as well. So anyway, I wanted to point that out just because over the years, as I've been doing this research, I've of course come across numerous examples of people doing that kind of thing, where they tend to boil everything down to one single cause or point of origin, whether it's Opus Dei or the Freemasons or some other individual or entity altogether. And I think it's important to remember that there's always a little bit of a nuance at play, and it's usually never that simple. This interview with Rod Dreher revealed something else. Vance was looking to convert. Rod claims had initially wanted to bring him into the Orthodox faith, but decided Catholicism was the better fit. He then introduced Vance to a Catholic religious figure named Dominic Legge, or Leg. I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to be pronouncing it Legge until someone tells me otherwise. A Dominican friar and, just like Vance, a Yale Law alumnus. Legge had become a priest at the Dominican House of Studies. Before joining the order, Legge had clerked for Judge Diarmuid O'Scanlan, I'm probably mispronouncing that, my apologies, of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, and he was the first priest with whom Vance discussed becoming Catholic. When Vance moved to Cincinnati in 2018, Legge knew exactly who to call: Father Henry Stephen at St. Gertrude Church, a fellow Dominican who had interned for the very same Judge O'Scanlan that Legge had clerked for before taking his vows. Legge had spent months laying the intellectual groundwork from Washington, and when the moment was right, Vance was handed off to Stephen for the final intimate work of preparation and baptism. The two men, shaped by the same judicial mind, positioned on either side of a very important convert, but it goes even deeper than that. Father Stephen was ordained a priest in May 2018 by Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., just months before Legge would hand Vance off to him in Cincinnati. In August 2019, Vance was baptized by Father Henry Stephen at St. Gertrude Priory in Cincinnati. He chose St. Augustine as his patron saint. That choice is worth paying attention to. Augustine was not the love thy neighbor kind of saint. He believed humans were broken, selfish, and incapable of governing themselves without being forced to. Augustine's answer to that problem was power: strong rules, strong authority, strong control, all in service of getting souls in heaven, whether they liked it or not. Vance actually said that Augustine, quote, gave me a way to understand the Christian faith in a strongly intellectual way, and that Augustine's book, The City of God, was directly relevant to his thinking on policy. He wasn't picking a patron saint, he was picking a philosophy. Now he's going, we can assume, to apply that very specific philosophy to his office as vice president of a very diverse and not wholly Christian or Catholic country, which makes me feel just kind of nauseous. And yes, the Dolan that ordained the priest months before he baptized Vance is the very same Dolan who had lobbied against reforming child sex abuse statutes of limitations in Wisconsin and failed to report priests who sexually abused children. He's since retired and now champions the NYPD. Isn't that nice? Fruits of a poisonous tree. These are not insignificant connections. They all thread together. They are all embedded deeply in the same power nexus of an organization known as Opus Dei. In 2016, Cardinal Dolan handed the parish of St. Agnes in Manhattan to Opus Dei priests, making him one of the most senior American Catholic figures to formally expand the order's institutional footprint in the U.S. That was in 2016. Leggie's Thomistic Institute received the top honor at the Catholic Information Center's annual gala in 2024, the John Paul II New Evangelization Award. For reference, the CIC is Opus Dei's DC headquarters. That was in 2024. And then there's Peter Thiel, the billionaire who built Vance and who has been close to Opus Dei since his Stanford days when the order's chief American vicar, Father Arnie Panula, took him under his wing. It was a friendship that lasted 40 years, ending only when Panula died of cancer in July 2017 at the Catholic Information Center where his wake was held. And the deeper you look, the more connections you'll find. For example, Hallow is a Catholic prayer app funded by Thiel, funded and Vance-owned Narya Capital that became the #1 app in the Apple Store. At its peak, it directed millions of users to read The Way, the founding text of Opus Dei. Opus Dei cheered them on. Most users had no idea. That would actually be a fun deep dive video to do at some point, would be to go into the whole Hallow app, because I've been watching that thing unfold like a car crash in slow motion, honestly, since it came out. And it was very, very obvious to me, and I think to anyone else who has spent any time researching this world, the ideological forces that were influencing the app, so to speak. So here is a timeline of the various tracks influencing J.D. Vance's sort of conversion here. And we've got philosophy on one side, we've got this judicial nexus, and then we've got this clerical side over here. Everything coming together to coalesce into his 2019 baptism at St. Gertrude Priory in Cincinnati, where he took the name Augustine. To quote George Carlin, "It's a big club, and you ain't in it." Opus Dei, Latin for Work of God, is a Catholic organization with a unique and powerful legal status inside the church. They call it a personal prelature, which basically means they answer to Rome directly and operate outside the normal rules that govern every other Catholic institution on earth. True or false? I would like to know from any of my listeners who understand the canonical side of what's happening a bit better. Opus Dei continues to be referred to as a personal prelature in news media and articles like this one, and even maybe perhaps by themselves. Yet I am also reading things that are saying that when Pope Francis published his initial motu proprio back in 2022 or something like that, that what he put forth in that motu proprio removed Opus Dei's personal prelature status, which is one reason why the vicar of Opus Dei is no longer called a vicar. He now is called something like a manager or something like that. It's got different language, but that change doesn't really seem to be something that many people are super aware of, and does not really seem to be something that is impacting how the organization is perceived. So if you know anything about that, please sound off in the comments down below. I would be really interested to know your thoughts, or to understand that a little bit better. Is Opus Dei still a personal prelature or not? Yes or no? I don't know. Since its founding in 1928, they do not publish a membership list. Members are actually forbidden from telling people they belong. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily forbidden. I've heard from members that it's just sort of implicitly understood that you don't have to disclose that, and that's not something that you need to do. And I think that the idea of it is sort of, in the Bible, there are discussions about how when you pray, you shouldn't be doing it on a street corner where everyone can see you. You should be doing it in the privacy of your own home between you and God. And so I think what I have come to understand from listening to people and talking to people, the understanding, I think, on the inside is that, well, we don't need to tell people because it's nothing to make a big deal of. We're just trying to live our lives as our vocations in everyday work and everything like that. So That's the idea, but the reality is that it translates to secrecy and to a lack of like understanding on the part of the public and other Catholics who interact with this organization. It makes things very murky. So, when powerful people in Washington, in courtrooms, and in government buildings are members, you simply do not get to know. Women make up the majority of the membership but have zero governing power. In many of their centers, women are brought in to cook for the men and sent home. That is the role, permanent servitude. And it gets worse. As Gareth Gore reported in his book Opus, members have described cult-like recruiting tactics that target teenagers. People have reported being psychologically manipulated, cut off from their families, and controlled down to what they were allowed to read. In 2024, the Financial Times published an investigation where 16 women were described being forced into what was unpaid domestic servitude. In case you're wondering, that's labor trafficking. Four senior Opus Dei priests are currently facing human trafficking charges in Argentina. These are not fringe accusations, these are lawsuits, criminal charges, and on the record testimony, and yet they have judges. They have politicians. Hell, even convicted FBI spy Robert Hansen was a member. That's how deeply they are embedded in America's government. The CIC is the same operation disgraced Opus Dei priest C. John McCloskey, a former Wall Street banker turned priest, ran until Opus Dei quietly removed him over a sexual misconduct complaint that cost them nearly $1 million to settle. His successor, Arnie Panula, an Opus Dei priest who'd been close friends with Peter Thiel since recruiting him at Stanford. McCloskey's time at the CIC is worth knowing about. Working out of a small office just across the street from the White House, he personally brought several well-known figures into the Catholic Church, including Newt Gingrich, Senator Sam Brownback, Judge Robert Bork, columnist Robert Novak, and CNBC host Lawrence Kudlow. In a 2003 interview, he compared his work to sales, saying it was just like the brokerage business or any business of sales. That is what the CIC has always been, a sales floor for the souls of powerful men. My view, this is a quote from J.D. Vance, on public policy and what the optimal state should look like are pretty aligned with Catholic social teaching. That was one of the things that drew me to the Catholic Church. I saw a real overlap between what I would like to see and what the Catholic Church would like to see. He said this in 2019 to the American Conservative. The people behind Project 2025 have direct ties to Opus Dei's Information Center in Washington, located quite literally right across the street from the White House. The CIC is led by an Opus Dei priest, and Opus Dei explicitly rejects the separation of church and state, a bedrock principle of the U.S. Constitution that the organization regards at best besides the point. I have done some recent research into this whole church-state separation thing and work that is being done to dismantle it in this country. So if you're interested, you can go and find that over on the channel, because there's been some things that have happened within the last year even that are pretty significant when it comes to the church-state conversation. Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, has stated that he goes to the CIC every week for guidance that apparently led to the writing of the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, the guiding document for the U.S. government now. When Roberts gave a speech at the CIC in September 2023, the bronze statue of Opus Dei founder Jose Maria Escrivá was reportedly covered up before the event. When Roberts, that's a sentence I just read, per Gareth Gore's reporting, this was done to avoid embarrassing photos. In the speech itself, Roberts directly quoted Escrivá and called for what he termed radical incrementalism, conceding, quote, there simply isn't the public support, lamentably, right now, for the worldview he is promoting. Several of Project 2025's authors, including Roger Severino and Ken Cuccinelli, have been publicly identified as Opus Dei members. Vance was Heritage's top pick for VP. He and Roberts are close enough that Vance wrote the foreword to Roberts' book Dawn's Early Light, which was a separate manifesto about dismantling and remaking the federal government. This isn't new. Back in 2021, before he was a senator, Vance went on a podcast with Manosphere influencer Jack Murphy and told Trump exactly what to do if he won again. Quote, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. And when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say, quote, the Chief Justice has made his ruling. Now let him enforce it, end quote. Which really just gives me the impression that these people are like really huffing their own farts because they are constantly comparing themselves to this country's founding fathers in a way that, as an American citizen myself, I frankly find pretty offensive. I think that Andrew Jackson would probably find it pretty offensive to be compared to somebody like Donald Trump, frankly. And it's interesting, isn't it, that they keep needing to do that. They keep needing to remind people that they are so representative of America's founding fathers, because we sure as hell cannot see it for ourselves, can we? The emperor has no clothes. When are we all going to admit it? Vance was, of course, referring to Jackson's defiance of the Supreme Court that led to the Trail of Tears, where thousands of Cherokee people died, and he wasn't speaking hypothetically. The infrastructure to actually do it was already being built. In 2021, a young political operative named Saurav Sharma started an organization called American Moment. At the 2024 National Conservatism Conference, Blake Masters stated that the funding came from Peter Thiel and David Sachs, with Vance himself making the introduction. Vance was also sat on the group's advisory board. Masters, like Vance, is a longtime Thiel protege. He served as the COO of Thiel Capital and president of the Thiel Foundation, and Thiel poured roughly $15 million into his 2022 Senate run, mirroring the $10 million he gave Vance's Ohio campaign that same cycle. I'm starting to get the impression that the person who's actually in the office of vice president is not the person whose face we see. Anybody else getting that impression? American Moment's mission, in its own words, is to recruit a young, ideological, unqualified group of staffers to fill a future Republican administration. Today, Sharma works inside the White House as special assistant to the president for personnel. In that role, he plays a major part in deciding who gets hired across the federal government. His own ethics disclosure shows he holds stock in Palantir, the surveillance company co-founded by Thiel, which is now expanding its contracts with ICE. The man Vance helped fund is now staffing the executive branch. The man who built him is collecting the contracts. And their playbook, I mean, the historical, very recent historical record reflects their playbook and the success of it. I mean, Doge, that entire harebrained scheme, all young, ideological, underqualified people, all of them in Doge, getting rid of people who had been doing public service for decades, probably longer than some of these newcomers had even been alive. Now that we know that J.D. Vance is a follower of St. Augustine, but guess who else is? The Pope. And somehow they both read him entirely different. Leo, elected May 25th, first American pope ever, has spent his entire career on the tradition Vance cosplays on Fox News. So when Vance went on Hannity and twisted Ordo Amoris, the order of love, into a justification for mass deportation, love family, then neighbors, then country, then men, then maybe everyone else, Cardinal Prevost shared an article titled, "J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others." Pope Francis sent American bishops the same rebuke weeks before he died. Then, in April 2026, Vance, now vice president, told the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology. A sitting VP scolding a sitting Pope. That does not happen unless someone tells you to do it. And here we got Thiel and Trump holding hands. Isn't that sweet? Isn't that cute? Woof. Enter Peter Thiel, who in March 2026 flew to Rome, confiscated everyone's phones at a Renaissance palace, and delivered 4 secret lectures called The Biblical Antichrist. His thesis, the Antichrist, is a Luddite who will scare humanity into one world government by stopping AI and tech. His nominees, AI safety researchers, climate activist Greta Thunberg, and per leaked recordings, the Pope. Thiel said out loud he wanted a lot more conflict between Vance and Leo. Weeks later, Vance delivered on cue. At one point, even Peter Thiel admitted he was nervous about Vance getting too close to the Pope, as if worried the relationship might undo the worldview Thiel had spent years shaping in him. It's very interesting how a Catholic organization is so adamant linked with men who hate the Pope. There is no membership list with Vance's name on it. There doesn't need to be. You can map a man who you can map a man who built by him, funds him, prays for him, and tells him who his enemies are. So, fascinating article, ties a lot of loose threads together for me. The most significant being Dominic Legge, and stay tuned because I will have more to say on Dominic Legge and the Thomistic Institute very, very, very soon. It's so timely, all of this. There's such a sense of divine timing sometimes with the way that I do the work that I do and the way that information comes out and how things sometimes coincide. It's like the minute that I decide to start looking into something or I start critically researching something, something will come out, some piece of news media or journalism will come out, or some piece of testimony or something that will corroborate or even sometimes confirm research that I have been doing. And Dominic Legge is a significant person. You should not forget that name, and you should not forget the Thomistic Institute, and you should stay tuned because I will have more to say about him, like I said, very, very soon. So moving on, now we are going to take a break from American political discourse, and we're going to hop across the pond to Scotland. The reason why I want to talk about this article is because this is something that I've seen come up off and on probably for the last 3 years or so, and the conversation never really seems to go anywhere, and yet it is continually being brought up in Scotland. I've seen it mentioned in Ireland as well, that they want Scottish police to declare their links to organizations like the Orange Order, Freemasons, and Opus Dei. And they say it comes after the Metropolitan Police in London added Freemasonry to its list of associations that must be disclosed by officers. So this was published May 10th of last month. Anti-sectarian campaigners have demanded Police Scotland force officers to declare links to Freemasons, the Orange Order, and Opus Dei. Scottish charity Kneel by Mouth, which has campaigned against bigotry for 25 years, say such police memberships must be declared to ensure transparency within the ranks. It comes after the Metropolitan Police in London added Freemasonry to its list of associations that must be disclosed by officers. Critics say secret police links to such groups fuel concerns about bias, corruption, and an old boys network, especially in Scotland, where sectarian tensions have long raised fears over fairness in public institutions. Despite the mounting pressure, Police Scotland has so far refused to follow the Met's lead, saying only the matter remains under review. Scotland's Chief Inspector of Constabulary, Craig Naylor, has stepped up calls for Police Scotland to make a decision on the issue and a significant intervention. While the Association of Scottish Police Superintendents, ASPS, which represents senior officers, has expressed qualified support for the policy change, Kneel by Mouth was founded in 2000 by Cara Henderson following the 1995 sectarian murder of her friend Mark Scott, who was 16 years old, while walking past a Rangers pub in Bridgeton. Charity director Dave Scott said, quote, "When it comes to standards in public life and those who officially monitor and enforce these, I'd be in favor of those individuals publicly declaring membership of religious groups such as the Freemasons, Orange Order, or Opus Dei. Whilst membership of these groups should not preclude membership of enforcement agencies such as the police, given the often opaque nature of their various practices, it would be in the interests of public transparency and accountability for membership to be declared. These groups state publicly that they are law-abiding and have nothing to hide, so I'd struggle to see why any member in such a position would have an issue with declaring their involvement." Craig Naylor, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary in Scotland, said, "I am aware that Police Scotland is currently keeping this issue under review and would be supportive of them determining their position. Police Scotland admit they have no idea how many officers may be members of the groups, stating in a FOI response that the information is quote-unquote not held. They added, "There is no requirement for Police Scotland officers to divulge such information, nor for it to be recorded on their personal record. In this instance, it would instead be up to the individual officer whether to share that information or have it recorded." The Loyal Orange Institution of Scotland rejected calls for officers to be forced to be open about membership. censorship. Chief Executive David Walter said, "The Loyal Orange Institution of Scotland is a law-abiding Christian organization which has existed in Scotland since 1978, and the state has never hitherto felt it necessary to make membership of it a declarable interest. The order is at a loss to understand why, after nearly 230 years, this should now be deemed necessary." Opus Dei also rejected suggestions that it should be added to any list, insisting it was neither exclusionary, secretive, nor sectarian. Of course, a Police Scotland spokesperson said, quote, "There is currently no requirement for Police Scotland officers to divulge such information, nor for it to be recorded on their personnel record. Police Scotland continues to keep this subject matter under review." So I think that's really interesting. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts and your opinions. Do you think that individuals who are serving public office, so public servants of any type, firefighters, law enforcement, EMS, people working in civic government, do you think that they should be required to disclose their affiliations with organizations and religious entities? Or do you think that that is an infringement of their rights? I used to, I think, come down on the side that it would be an infringement of rights to demand that people disclose their affiliations with organizations and entities. But I think now I'm coming more around with time and experience and learning more about the world, coming around to the perspective that if you are a public servant, meaning that you are providing a service for the public that is funded by the public, by taxpayer funds, then you lose a degree of anonymity. Sorry, you just do. If you want to be a public servant, if you want to be a civil representative, if you want to work in law enforcement or fire, and you're going to be getting paid by the taxpayer, you need to be disclosing the organizations that you're involved with for the sake of transparency, because I believe the taxpayer has a right to know how the money that they are paying for these services are going to be used by the people who are getting paid. And fact of the matter is, when you are a civil servant, you represent a diverse group of people most of the time. At least if you're in a Western country, you're representing a diverse group of people with a diverse background, differences of political opinion, differences of religious belief and perspective. And I don't really think it should be difficult to see how there can be problems that arise and conflicts of interest when you have someone who's in a public position being paid by the taxpayer, engaging in activities that I think a lot of people would view as divisive and largely negative for their society, for their community. And I think that is information that people have a right to, again, when that taxpayer element is at play. If you're going to be a public servant, you don't have the same right to privacy that everybody else does. It's a big deal to be a representative of your people, to serve the people. And I don't think that we treat it with near the respect or the seriousness that it deserves. And I think that a lot of our current problems, frankly, politically, socially, economically, culturally, can be boiled down to that fact. So that is my opinion and that is my perspective on it. Feel free to disagree with me and explain why you feel differently. I am open to changing my mind if I feel like there is a compelling reason to, but that is where my mind is sitting at now. And again, that comes from doing this kind of research and seeing time and time and time again how these things that people get involved with, which should not in any way, shape, or form impact or influence their work as representatives of the people, nonetheless continues to do just that. And actually, in a number of cases, like in the article that we just read about J.D. Vance's conversion, presents in some very problematic ways and in some ways that I think are harmful to democracy. So moving on, this is an article from Newsweek, and we're jumping back over to discussion of U.S. Governance and politics in U.S. governance. This was published on May 11th. The headline says, "Trump's culture war has a new patron saint and a fallen idol." In the spring of 2025, the federal government discovered a new humanities critic, ChatGPT. According to U.S. District Judge Colleen McMahon's May 7th ruling this year, officials with DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, associated with Elon Musk's government cutting campaign, used the chatbot to help decide whether National Endowment for the Humanities grants related at all to DEI. The judge said the government had not meaningfully defined the term and ruled that the resulting mass termination of more than 1,400 humanities grants violated the First Amendment, the equal protection component of the Fifth Amendment, and the limits on DOGE's statutory authority. What were we just talking about? So much for the idol of efficiency. Whatever other achievements DOGE may have had, it appears artificial intelligence does not make the best judge of American civilization, particularly when the enemy is an undefined, though perhaps still all too real, ideological taboo. The absurdity had local ductwork. One canceled grant was not a gender studies symposium, but a $349,000 award to replace the aging HVAC system at the High Point Museum in North Carolina. ChatGPT flagged it as diversity-related because better preservation would make collections accessible to diverse audiences. The culture war had finally reached the air conditioner. Yeah, I can't imagine a better way to make very important decisions about the future of a country's organization than to use a experimental artificial intelligence chatbot with a history and a proven record of gaslighting people into psychotic neurosis. I can't imagine what could be. I'm shocked it didn't go better. The absurdity, I read that paragraph. So far, so old news. What's revealing is what happened after Musk's Doge took a chainsaw to the old grant system, but before the courts finished sweeping up. On January 15th this year, the National Endowment for the Humanities announced $75.1 million for 84 humanities projects, including a $10 million award to the Foundation for Excellence in Higher Education, which says it is an independent, nonpartisan, grant-making organization for, quote, recovering the humanities in service of the university. That one grant was larger than the Foundation's latest available revenue filing of $7.29 million and roughly equal to its expenses at $9.83 million. Now, if you couldn't pick it up from the sardonic tone in my voice, we are about to learn some things about this Foundation for Excellence in Higher Education, or as I like to call it, FEHE. The left sees a purge, followed by a restoration project for the right. Inside Higher Ed described the January grants as millions flowing into the conservative-aligned projects and reported that civics, Western civilization, American history, and great books programs were major winners. In a May 10 investigation, the Financial Times reported that FEHE had extensive operational ties to Opus Dei-linked figures in campus institutes. Those figures, the Foundation, other think tanks, and the network, and the National Endowment for the Humanities did not respond to the outlet's request for comment. Inside Higher Ed quoted Princeton professor Katie Chenoweth, saying the Foundation's president, Luis Tejas, quote, basically says we cannot leave society in the hands of secular people. While the Foundation's operations director, Kelly Hanlon, told Inside Higher Ed, the Foundation, quote, does not have any political, ideological, or religious affiliation, nor does it fund policy work. I don't believe them. The right sees a long-needed correction. The Foundation says the $10 million grant would support new classical humanities programs, course development, seminars, workshops, fellowships, mentorships, graduate programs, and postdoctoral fellowships. After the award, Tejas said higher education had, quote, an opportunity right now to return to its purpose. I wonder what that means. And that the Foundation could, quote, be a voice of reason, reform, and hope. The American Conservative described the grants as part of an effort to channel money towards civics, the Western canon, and great books programs, which supporters view as a corrective to liberal dominance on campuses. But the Foundation for Excellence in Higher Education, FEHE, received a $10 million federal humanities grant after reporting $7,290,829 in revenue, $9,825,103 in expenses, $11,723,941 in assets, and $4,269,173 in net assets for the fiscal year ending December 2024. One grant was therefore about 137% of the foundation's prior year revenue, about 102% of its expenses, and about 13% of the National Endowment for the Humanities' entire $75.1 million January award round. Federal rules allow faith-based organizations to receive direct government grants for secular services while barring the use of direct federal support for worship, religious instruction, or proselytization. The National Endowment for the Humanities' own grant rules say recipients may not use award funds to promote a particular political, religious, or ideological point of view, advocate a social or political program, or support specific public policies or legislation. So the question is not whether religious conservatives may build educational institutions. In America, everyone builds educational institutions. It is whether Trump's federal government is moving from broad grant making to civilizational venture capital. And there is some evidence for this. In its August 2025 funding round, the National Endowment for the Humanities announced $34.79 million for 97 projects, including a $10 million University of Virginia Award for Founding Era Papers projects, which the agency described at the time as the largest grant it had ever awarded. In September 2025, it awarded $10.4 million to Tikva for a Jewish civilization project, calling it the largest grant in its history and saying it would combat anti-Semitism through education on Jewish history, culture, and identity in the context of Western history. So if you were reading through here, wondering about a connection between Opus Dei and a certain blue and white country overseas, I think we just found it. In January 2026, it announced the $75.1 million round that included the $10 million award for FIHI in higher education, plus a $10 million University of Texas at Austin award for a Great Books and Civic Renewal Initiative, a $5 million Ohio State University Award for Citizenship Education, a $2.7 million award to the Institute on Religion and Public Life for fellowships and writer-in-residence slots at First Things, a $2 million plus award to the Abigail Adams Institute for Humanities Programming around Harvard, a $1.73 million award to the University of South Carolina for a Great Books program, a $1.13 million award to Providence College for a St. Dominic Fellows program rooted in Catholic and Western traditions. Remember what I said about Dominic Legge? And a $1 million award to the University of St. Thomas in Houston for an institution-wide civic education initiative. The amount of money that we are talking about here is just like blowing my mind. There is also a Founding Fathers wing of the story. The January list included 4 $3 million grants to advance editions of the collected papers of John Adams, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, and Martin Van Buren, plus funding for the Museum of the American Revolution to support a conference, podcast, exhibition catalog, digital interactive, and educational resources on the Declaration of Independence. Now, I would just like to take this moment to remind everyone that history is written by the victors. History is written by the victors. History is not recorded by the victors. History is not remembered by the victors. History is written by the victors. Ergo, it is created by the victors. So why do we think they might be throwing all of this funding into bringing the American Revolution and all of the historical mystique around that period of American history into the popular zeitgeist again? I certainly have some ideas, but I want you to think about it and ask yourself some deep questions about why that might be. And remember, like I said, that history is written by the victors. And so maybe while you're asking yourself these questions, you should also ask yourself whether or not the history that you were told is actually reflective of the reality for people at that point in time. Just some things to keep in mind. This is not a sprinkler system, misting modest grants over museums, archives, scholars, state councils, and local exhibitions. It is a model of fewer, bigger, more symbolically charged awards. The University of Virginia grant was about the founding. The Tikva grant was about Jewish civilization and anti Semitism. The Foundation grant was about recovering the humanities at elite universities through classical humanities, civics, economics, and civil discourse. Each can be defended. Perhaps even each is essential. Each also fits the Trump era instinct that culture is downstream from institutions, and institutions are downstream from whoever signs the check. The old humanities, establishment, often funded projects, and in the idiom of diversity, memory, race, gender, local history, and marginal voices. The new establishment funds projects on the idiom of founding principles, Western civilization, and religious inheritance. Both camps believe the humanities form citizens and that their side is doing good. Doge's actions reveal the limits of anti-woke iconoclassism. Destroying institutions is easy enough, but building their replacements requires the very things populists despise: committees, grants, administrators, fellowships, and compliance forms. The Trump culture war has learned that lesson, and not simply the lesson that the future is deciding by shouting diversity, equity, and inclusion into a chatbot. So let me know what you think of this article down below. Did you know that ChatGPT was being used to slash government programs to determine which government programs were valid and deserving of continued funding or not? Because I just think that that is absolutely insane. And if you haven't gone down the rabbit hole on the whole AI thing, I guess I'm about to out myself as a Luddite here, because I have, and it's not good on any scale: environmental, social, educational, economic, personal. It's not good, and the research that is beginning to come out of it is very, very disturbing, and I am concerned about the trajectory of a society that is being groomed into just accepting artificial intelligence as a factor in their lives. And I'm incredibly concerned about where that is going to lead us as a country and as a society and everything else. I'm very anti AI, in case you were wondering. And there are a lot of different reasons for it, and it does not make me happy at all to know that my government, the government that is supposed to work for the people, that is supposed to work for me, is using such sloppy technology to do what should be really, really important work. But I mean, they're not up there applying any kind of due diligence to this thing, and nor have they ever been, and I think that that is abundantly clear at this point. So this is a funny little article. It's a letter that got published on Catholic League, and it's amusing, so I wanted to read it. Let me get a drink of water before we get into this, though, because I'm going to need my vocal range. So the title is, Was Pope Leo Hoodwinked? This was published on March 18th. Oh, I thought this was published in May. Sometimes it's so weird, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because if a website gets updated, if they change something on a page, it'll get kicked back out as a new piece of information. This is not the first time this has happened to me, where I've saved something and it was oh, MA, and I saw 2026, so I assume, oh, May, because I'm scanning quickly, and then when I go back to actually sit down and look at it, it's from a couple of months ago. I don't really understand why that happens. Why it gets kicked up again in relevance for each month after month. Maybe if you know something about SEO, you can explain that. Anyway, I'll go ahead and mention it because I didn't mention it back in March. And it's interesting, and there's something that he says in here that I think bears reflecting on. So basically, this was written by William A. Donahue, PhD. I'm sure he's relevant in some way, shape, or form to someone somewhere. I do know the name, I just don't remember the relevance at this point in time. And he basically writes this letter that he said he sent to the Pope, which is just kind of incredible to me. Basically setting the Pope Leo straight on why he was wrong to invite investigative journalist Gareth Gore to the Vatican to talk to him about his work and research into Opus Dei, to talk to him about his book, Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking, and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church. And after the fact, Gareth Gore said that Pope Leo called his book a rigorous piece of work. And Bill here is just completely incensed over that because, in his opinion, Gore's book is anything but rigorous, and he thinks it's sloppy, strewn with hyperbole, innuendo, and out falsehoods. And that is what I want to bring your attention to. I remember when it was announced that Opus was going to be published, when like pre-orders were announced and the public became aware that this book was going to be coming out, I had a few people reach out to me who were excited and scared because they were excited about such an impressive piece of research being published, exposing an organization like Opus Dei in such an excellent way. And they were scared that it would basically get killed before it ever got to see the light of day by like Opus Dei legal or whatever happening behind the scenes. And my thought at the time was that, this book was published by Simon & Schuster, who is a well-respected, like, legacy publisher who's been around for a very, very long time. They have a reputation to uphold, and it seems to me like they take it very seriously. And so, from my perspective, and this is what I told people at the time, it didn't make sense to me for Simon & Schuster to put their name on something like Gareth Gore's book, and then to support the PR surrounding its launch and everything, if there was even the slightest chance that this book would be provably false and contain out and out falsehoods the way that Bill here says that it does. And I still stand by that perspective. And the reason why is because it's not as if Opus Dei hasn't come after organizations or people who have stated things falsely in the past, or stated things that the organization decided were false and defamatory in some way, something like that. That has happened throughout this organization's history, and they've been successful with it at times too. And so, from my perspective and my point of view, if this book was false, if the things that were in Opus couldn't withstand scrutiny, if the best of like Simon & Schuster's team couldn't like spot the falsehoods, if things were really so incorrect, this book never would have seen the light of day. And I don't believe it ever would have been published. And if it had been published, it would not have done so well. You can do some research on this, but there have been books that have been published in the past, not necessarily in the English-speaking world, but in other parts of the world, by people who have done research into Opus Dei or former members trying to share their experiences about Opus Dei, and the organization has caught and killed those books after like a first edition run or something like that, has managed to basically squelch any attempt at raising awareness about what's actually going on, basically. So there's precedent there for them doing that. They've done that kind of thing before. They've come after people legally before. I am sure they will do it again. So when people say that, oh, Opus is full of lies and hyperbole and it's sloppy, I really have to question where that is coming from. And he says here, to cite one example, any author who portrays the late Cardinal George Pell as a pedophile is either ignorant or malicious. That is unfortunate, because unfortunately there are people who will believe that unless someone's been criminally convicted, there is no possibility and no chance in heaven or hell that there's any truth to any of the things that people have said about them. And in my opinion, based on what I have read and what I've heard, Cardinal George Pell, the late Cardinal George Pell, is an excellent example of that. And this is an example of the kind of obfuscation that people will engage in whenever someone comes out who is critical of a powerful entity like Opus Dei. It happens very, very quickly, and you can kind of see it. And I feel like this is a really, really good example. And then he ends this saying that he respectfully requests that Pope Leo take another look at Gore's book, because he's saying, I recognize that you are the leader of one of the most powerful and influential religious organizations in the world, and you probably read multiple languages and well educated, but I don't think you actually understood what you were reading in this book. So let me set you straight, Pope Leo, because I'm Bill Donahue, PhD, and my opinion is more valid than anything that this sloppy and careless investigative journalist has to say. That is the perspective that I am getting from this. And again, I think it is intellectually dishonest, because I think if we are really critical about it, really honest about it, if what was in this book, and I'm pointing over here because I have it on my shelf, if what was in this book was provably, demonstrably false, do we ever think it would have seen the light of day? Really? I don't think so. I don't think so. And so I also think that Bill Donahue doth protest too much. Let me know what you think. Moving right along, this is something out of Spain. I feel like the Spanish church, Spanish government, Spanish civil organizations have had a lot more success with creating frameworks to help victim survivors of church abuse, or state abuse as well, actually, if we're being honest. More so than like what we have here in this country, even, which I think is interesting. This headline says the 6,000 euro from the lawsuit against El Jueves will allow Christian lawyers to finally file their first abuse lawsuit against the church. Quote, "We have overstepped our bounds by suing individuals and publications, but the ultimate target was always the church," explains Polonia Castellanos. After years of fundraising, the Christian Lawyers Foundation has finally raised enough money to file its first lawsuit against the church for all cases of sexual abuse and pedophilia, according to its president, Polonia Castellanos. "The goal of our organization is to safeguard the essential values of Christianity, and that means cleansing the institution of the church, forcing it to compensate thousands of victims of sexual abuse," Castellanos explained this morning in a statement released by the organization. Now, I will say one thing that I'm wondering about as I am reading these articles, because this conversation about frameworks funding compensation, reparations for victims of abuse in Spain has been ongoing for quite some time now, for as long as I've been paying attention to it. It's been ongoing. And so what I wonder about, here in the United States, we had dioceses that were brought to court over abuse and things. I'm thinking specifically of New Orleans, Boston, I want to say Los Angeles, or maybe it was Portland. I don't remember, so don't quote me on that. But there have been dioceses, I know that there have been dioceses in this country that have been brought to court over this kind of thing, and who like basically declared bankruptcy or threatened to declare bankruptcy because they could not pay the victims. The victim count was so high that that paying for the care and treatment that people need after they sustain these types of abuse would have sunk the diocese, which I would argue, okay, what are you waiting for? But I'm wondering if something like that is going to happen here, or how Spain, these organizations in Spain, are going to go about structuring and accessing like funding and compensation, reparations, all that kind of thing. Because, like I said, in this country, when that has tried to happen, when it has ended up in the courts, which is, usually where you expect some type of justice to be meted out, that hasn't always happened. It's actually been really, really frustrating. So it'll be interesting to see. That's something that's in the back of my mind as I'm reading through here. Maybe this will illuminate a little bit. But they go on to say, with this final settlement, Christian Lawyers concludes its fundraising campaign and will end its litigation activity against individuals, associations, and publications. The 6,000 euro corresponding to this lawsuit against El Jueves and RBA was the final amount needed to establish a fully qualified legal team. From now on, Christian Lawyers will focus its activity on legal actions directed against the Archdiocese, Opus Dei, and other powerful and influential ecclesiastical entities in our country, the organization explained in a statement. Castellanos herself admits that many of the lawsuits filed in recent years were ploys to get media attention and raise funds. Quote, "especially this last one against El Jueves, which I have to admit I am a bit of an an idiot for? Well, quite a bit. The foundation's president admits with a laugh. She apologizes for all of the damage caused to freedom of expression and the public, but trusts that the defendants themselves understand that she is trying to achieve finally filing a lawsuit against the church for cases of pedophilia, then that it justifies everything. Does that justify everything? I'm reading that and I have like a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I'm just gonna like identify how the feelings that are coming up for me as I'm reading this. And they're admitting to basically filing lawsuits, not because there was some sort of like actual grievance or justice that needed to be achieved, but simply to get attention and to raise funds, which is I would see as like an abuse, frankly, of a legal system. We have some that kind of thing happen in this country too. People, especially like in the journalism space and like when it comes to free speech, people get sued all of the time for simply expressing their opinion and perspective. People get sued falsely for defamation, and the thing about lawsuits, and this is probably why they felt like it was no big deal, is that, you know, just because you sue someone doesn't mean that there's actually like an admittance of guilt there on the part of on the party that you're suing. You can sue anyone for anything. It doesn't mean anything. But a lot of the time, when somebody does get sued, the fact that they're getting sued and the reason why they're getting sued will be publicized in headlines and people will run with it, and before you know it, in the court of public opinion, a person is guilty before they have even actually entered a courtroom. And I view that as a problem. I think that is a massive problem, and I think it is an abuse of free speech. Right now we're having a case play out here in this country between a like First Amendment YouTuber and a toy company that makes Lego toys called Bricks and Minifigs, and they have placed this YouTuber whose name is Reckless Ben, under a restraining order. They've essentially gagged him from being able to talk about what is happening, and the whole reason and why he is being sued in the first place is questionable to me at best. Of course, I'm not a lawyer, but just as a member of the general public watching this, it feels like an abuse of the justice system. And everybody who's watching it over here who is on the side of Reckless Ben feels like it is an abuse of the justice system. That's why on YouTube there are First Amendment lawyers, YouTube lawyers, who have been talking about this issue. And we're so easily able to identify that it's an issue. And look, I want victim survivors of abuse, whether it's religious or state, regardless of the type of abuse, I want victim survivors to be able to access care and treatment and reparations, and for there to be an acknowledgement of the experiences that they had. But two wrongs do not make a right. And I actually am kind of disgusted by this, if I'm being totally honest, because I think that, like I said, this is an abuse of the legal system, and she's over here laughing it up and yucking it up about how she's such an idiot and everything. But it's okay because she trusts that the fact that they're trying to achieve justice for victims of pedophilia will justify everything that they did. Lady, I don't know that it does. I don't know that that exonerates you in any way, shape, or form. Bringing yourself down to the level of people who use the justice system to abuse and to repress and to harass people just because you're trying to achieve something that you believe in that is a good goal doesn't make that right. I think that's incredibly unethical, and it really grosses me out. Christian lawyers claim to have sued everyone they could, always prioritizing public dissemination of the lawsuit and subsequent fundraising through compensation or membership subscriptions. KK, El Jueves, comedians, and all kinds of media outlets. Any minimally irrelevant media outlet without exception, laments Castellanos, who calls all of this activity a necessary dirty work. So she's even acknowledging the fact that this is smarmy and slimy. Our obsession with helping the victims of all those ignominious crimes perpetrated by parish priests and bishops who have done so much damage to Christianity and, above all, to the victims got the better of us. And now, at last, we are going to go after all those criminals, which was always the ultimate goal of our foundation, which we will finally be able to dissolve, concludes the president of Christian Lawyers, who also thanks all of those judges who have been helping them for years accept absurd lawsuits. I don't know, guys. Like, I don't read this and feel great about it. Again, like I said, I want people to access care, and there need to be people fighting for justice. But do we really think that this is it? This feels gross. And if the shoe was on the other foot, if it was the Catholic Church or Opus Dei or any of these, this KK, El Jueves, whoever, that were coming after these people who are just trying to get justice for victims of church abuse, everyone would very clearly see that for what it is and would call it out and condemn it. But we're just supposed to laugh along with Castellanos here and just shrug and be like, well, the ends justify the means. No, the ends do not justify the means. And that's bullshit logic. And oh, by the way, that is the exact same logic that organizations like Opus Dei use to justify the way that they treat people, to justify the order of life that they set out for people, to justify the ways that they overstep any boundaries for people. The ends justify the means. It's okay. The ends justify the means, guys. Don't get so mad about it. It's an abuse of the justice system, but the ends justify the means, so it's fine. Is it? I don't think two wrongs make a right. I don't think the ends justify the means. I don't think lowering yourself to the level of the lowest common denominator because you're going to achieve what you want to achieve by any means necessary is honorable. Feel free to disagree with me. Moving right along, this is coming out of the Philippines now, Malaysia. Catholic-backed Truth Commission launched to investigate Philippines' drug war killings. Catholic Church leaders, human rights advocates, forensics experts, and academics on Wednesday launched an independent Truth Commission to document extrajudicial killings linked to a former President Rodrigo Duterte's anti-drug campaign and preserve the testimonies of victims and survivors. This was published May 28th, 2026. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, launched at Villa San Miguel in Mandaluyong City, seeks to establish what organizers described as a credible public record of killings carried out during the government's anti-drug campaign, which human rights groups say left thousands dead during Duterte's presidency beginning in 2016. The initiative is backed by Cardinal Pablo Vigilio David, who said the commission aims to confront buried truths surrounding the killings and the suffering endured by families left behind. The prelate of Caloocan said the commission seeks to uncover the truth that was buried together with the people who were said to have fought back, stressing that the phrase carried a heavy weight because the victims were human beings like us. He described the body as an independent and civilian initiative of the church, academia, and civil society, stressing that it would not replace either the International Criminal Court or the Philippine judicial system. David said the courts focus on determining criminal liability, while the Truth Commission seeks to uncover the broader realities behind the killings by listening to victims, survivors, families, and others connected to the violence in order to understand how the abuses happened and how they can be prevented from happening again. And that is such a critical part of this kind of work. It has to center the people with the first-hand experience. If you want to have any hope of fixing things for the future, of protecting people in the future, of understanding exactly what you need to do to ensure that things that have not happened in the past continue to happen in the future, you have to include the people who have that first-hand knowledge. And that can be difficult, right? Because trauma is messy. Trauma is it's messy, and it leaves people impacted for the rest of their lives, and it changes the way that people interact with the world and the way that people are able to show up and engage in conversations. It's hard, and including people like that may make the work a little bit more challenging, but it's necessary work that must happen at all times, and I'm so happy to see it reflected here for this commission. The commission is chaired by Raul Pangilinan, a former judge of the International Criminal Court and current dean of the University of the Philippines College of Law. Pangilinan said the commission's role would focus on truth-seeking and public documentation rather than prosecution, explaining that while courts determine criminal liability, the commission seeks to establish the truth hand in hand with the victims. He said the commission would gather testimonies, hold hearings, and issue reports that could support local and international accountability efforts. We will fully document the testimony of the witnesses and the victims, Pangilinan said. We will have periodic reports that will, in the end, come out with a report of the Truth Commission on what happened during the almost 1 decade of the war on drugs, he added. Pangilinan said the commission's findings could later support accountability efforts for state institutions and international bodies. We will issue our report and we will make sure that the responsible government agencies will receive our report, he said. If they find materials in these testimonies that can advance their own investigations, for me, that will be the most welcome development, he said. Human rights researcher Carlos Conde, who also serves as the Commission's executive director, said the body's documentation could help push government agencies to pursue accountability, stressing that the end goal here is justice. So if this compels the Department of Justice, the Commission on Human Rights, or the National Bureau of Investigation to use our documentation in future prosecutions, then we will be very happy to provide it, Conde said. Pangilinan also pointed out what he described as institutional failures that allowed the killings to persist, saying that there was almost a conspiracy of silence among government entities that enabled those behind the anti-drug campaign to have their way and exact such an immense toll on our people. Among the commissioners is forensic pathologist Raquel Fortune, who said the initiative could help strengthen forensic investigators and investigations and preserve evidence tied to the killings. Fortune said the dead still have something to say, stressing that forensic science exists to uncover the truth behind violent deaths. She said weak death investigation systems in the Philippines allowed many killings to go undocumented or improperly investigated, noting that in countries with functioning medical examiner systems, all deaths caused by violence would automatically undergo forensic examination. Fortune added that forensic science is fundamentally about pursuing the truth, which is why she considered her role in the commission important. Conde understands the role played by journalists and human rights workers in documenting killings during Duterte's presidency, saying the human rights community would have struggled to document all of this without media organizations and reporters who partnered with rights defenders in investigating the killings. He added that without those efforts to document the violence since 2016, we would not be here today. Psychosocial and trauma specialist Al Fuertes said the commission also seeks to address the long-term emotional and social impact of the killings. Fuertes warned the trauma from the killings could become transgenerational traumatization if left unaddressed. He said the commission would create spaces where victims, survivors, and former perpetrators could safely share their experiences, stressing that truth-telling must also involve listening to and affirming people who continue to live with the trauma of the killings. Vincentian priest and theologian Daniel Franklin Pilario said the initiative also carries an educational responsibility, especially for younger generations who grew up during the anti-drug campaign. Recalling his ministry in Payetas during the height of the killings, Pilario said they were burying 8 to 10 young men at a time, many of them fathers and breadwinners. As a pastor and theologian, my stance was to listen, he added. Pilario said the findings of the commission should eventually reach schools and universities, particularly Catholic educational institutions, warning that silence about the killings risks allowing distorted narratives about the drug war to shape younger generations. Citing Pope Francis' encyclical, he stressed that remembrance was necessary for healing and accountability, saying society can never move forward without remembering the past and must bear witness to future generations about the horrors of war and violence. David acknowledged that the Catholic Church itself did not immediately confront the killings during the early years of the anti-drug campaign. It took a while, he said, but when we were seeing the dead bodies piling up, and mostly these were poor people who could not afford a decent burial, my own perspective gradually changed. So when the bodies were literally piling up and you couldn't avoid seeing them, perspectives gradually changed, which is just such a shitty reality. David said the bigger scandal would have been for the church to remain silent in the face of killings and violence, adding that a society that does not care about murder and violence cannot genuinely promote peace. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Asking about funding, David said the commission had already received support from church, academic, and civil society networks, including international partners. He noted that one of the groups backing the initiative was a German Catholic charitable organization that had also supported a truth commission in Guatemala. That is why we gathered the courage to move forward, because there is a strong support for academic institutions, civil society, and church groups, both Catholic and Protestant, for restoring the dignity of our nation, he said. So I wanted to mention this Truth Commission that is investigating the Philippines drug war killings, because I very recently did a series here on the Deep Dive Project about the Board for the Protection of Women, which was a Spanish Franco era program that incarcerated women and girls as young as 8, women as old as 25, in basically concentration camps run by Catholic religious, for failing to conform to the fascist plan of life for Spanish people at that point in time. And it was a program that stuck around for like a decade plus after Franco passed away, and was not completely shut down until the mid 1980s. And even today, the true toll of the impact of this Board for the Protection of Women, what it did to people's lives and the harm that it caused, is something that people are still trying to get a grasp on. And it is honestly probably something that we will never fully be able to calculate the true impact of, because the historical record, so much of it was either never kept or has been destroyed. And it is important to acknowledge when efforts are being made to redress human rights abuses, when efforts are being made to acknowledge human rights crimes, and the people who are still living with the fallout and the trauma from those things. But since there was a Catholic element involved in this Philippine drug war killings thing, you have the quote in here from the guy saying that, like, once the bodies started piling up, then they noticed. I wanted to mention this and to draw your attention to it. They also mentioned a similar truth commission in Guatemala, and there have been truth commissions in countries all over the world. And that is actually something that, if you are interested in learning more about the state of human rights, the history of human rights, then looking into these truth commissions would be a great place to start for some independent research, because multiple countries around the world have had these truth commissions now, and many of them are still ongoing. So, getting to the end here, this is the last full article that I'll be reading for you today. This is from El País. This was published at the end of May. The headline says, "They didn't want to listen to either the children or the parents. What the judge ignored in the case of abuse of 11 minors at an Opus Dei school. An investigating judge has summoned 2 teachers as suspects and requests that the parents testify in Torrent. The Provincial Court of Valencia reopened the case in April after questioning the work of judges and the civil guard." So this has been an ongoing case of alleged child abuse at an Opus Dei school, with multiple victims implicated. It says in 2018, El País launched an investigation into pedophilia within the Spanish church and maintains an up-to-date database of all known cases. If you are aware of any that have not yet been reported, please write to us at abusos@elpais.es. For the cases in Latin America, they have a Latin America address there as well. When the provincial court requested on April 10th to reopen the case of a possible sexual assault against minors under 16, a case that had been dismissed by the Torrent Court of Instruction Number 1, the mother of 2 of the affected children couldn't believe it. Quote, "The lawyers told us to take a few days to review the court order calmly. As I flipped through the pages, I kept saying to myself, seriously? Is this really happening? It was a relief and a joy, but I live in terror that the same thing will happen again because everything goes back to the court whose work the provincial court has criticized," she says, sitting next to her husband in Valencia. The events, which date back to 2023, took place, according to documents this newspaper has accessed, at the Fomento El Vedat school, a center linked to Opus Dei in Torrent, Valencia. The school has more than 6,000 students, filed complaints, 7 families with children between the ages of 7 and 4, starting in January 2024. So these are young children. 11 students were reportedly affected. This mother summarizes her ordeal so far, quote, "The whole process has been horrific. It's hard when something like this happens to your children, and then the school's response has always been the same. Impossible. It couldn't have happened here." Children must be heard, ordered the provincial court in its April ruling, which also alluded to a judicial bias and described the school's testimony as biased and partisan. The complaints included statements that several of these children made to their parents. One of the children told his father that he had been sexually assaulted by a man he described as short, bald, ugly, and wearing a green plaid shirt. A mother recounts that her son on numerous occasions spoke to her about a man he calls Don P. The full name has been omitted from this article. Don P. sucks my penis every day in the cafeteria. He also added, "A man in a plaid shirt showed me his penis, and it's very big." Another boy, when questioned by his mother, confessed to physical assaults in the classroom when they were alone. "A short, bald man in a plaid shirt hit me on the penis with a pencil case and tied my legs together with tape." He also told the civil guard that this teacher told him not to tell anyone. Another boy, according to the complaint, told his parents at home, "A man takes me to the bathroom and sucks my penis and forces me to touch it." Absolutely disgusting. And let me just remind you once again that this was at an Opus Dei school. Okay. In the fall of 2023, some of these children began complaining, initially of physical aggression from Lucas, who's a fictitious name, a particularly violent 4-year-old classmate who was disciplined by the school and referred to psychological services. They were terrified and didn't want to go to school. One of the children confessed to his mother, "Lucas told me that if you rub your penis, a white liquid comes out, and if you touch it, it tickles." This mother, distressed, told several other mothers. These mothers then began questioning their children, and according to the complaint, which was initially sent to the juvenile prosecutor's office, several of them said that this boy pulled down a classmate's pants and masturbated, and that under the dining table he gave other children oral sex. According to one of the children's accounts, when the monitor caught him, she punished him by making him stand against a wall. So, when I was reading this paragraph and they mention these children being afraid of a particularly violent 4-year-old, as I'm reading this, the thought that immediately popped into my head is, why is this 4-year-old child so violent? Because that is not normal behavior. It's not normal behavior. It's not normal for children this young to be engaging in these types of activities with each other whatsoever. And I spend a lot of time in my free time listening to interviews and like podcast episodes with people who are victim survivors of a wide range of different types of abuses, life experiences. We're all survivors of our lives to some extent or another. And what I have learned from listening to victim survivors of sex abuse specifically in children, is that it causes quite a bit of neurological damage to that child, to the victim, and will induce in them behaviors that are like not appropriate for their age, are gigantic red flags. And it's pretty consistent in stories and accounts of cases like this where there's a child involved. If that child is doing things to other children, it's because they learned that from someone else, either another child or an adult. And the really sickening thing is, this is not just an Opus Dei problem. I am aware of this situation because of my research into this organization. But as I have said so many times in the past, Opus Dei is not special. And that includes the garden variety issues that it has underneath its organizational umbrella, including child abuse. And because of the fact that they have various ventures and various institutions that are completely geared towards children, like educational institutions and centers and clubs, when you are gathering children together in large number, predators are going to be attracted to them. It's just an inevitability and a fact of life that we must contend with. It's simply unavoidable. Predators are attracted to their prey. Human predators are attracted to their human prey. And this type of thing is not just happening in Opus Dei. Just the other day, I was like on TikTok and came across a video of a very distraught mother talking about a situation where her elementary school age daughter, so we're in that like 6 to 7 8 age range, I think, very young, was sexually assaulted by a classmate of hers, by a boy. And this is happening in schools all over the place: public schools, private schools, Opus Dei schools, Catholic schools, non-religious schools. It's happening everywhere, and the stories are consistent. Um, we got to be aware of it. I don't know what else to do about it. I can't do anything because I'm not a parent and I don't work in education. So all I can do is try to call people's awareness and attention to the fact that this is becoming such a big problem. And truth be told, I'm not convinced that it wasn't always a problem, that it hasn't always been a problem, that we haven't always had cases of abused children abusing other children. I have witnessed it in my own childhood. I know that it happens. So I don't know what to do about it other than to raise awareness about it, provide information about it, and encourage people who do have children to be present and aware and engaged, and to be having conversations with your children as soon as you possibly can about bodily autonomy, about safe touch, about safe people. There are so many resources now, so many of them free, for parents to do this kind of thing. There really is no excuse, frankly. In my opinion, if you are a parent in the 21st century and you have access to the internet, if you are living in a country like Spain and sending your children to a place like an Opus Dei school, you definitely do. It is your responsibility as a parent to protect your children and to set them up for success. And that means having really difficult conversations. And I know that that doesn't happen because parents don't want to be uncomfortable. But the abuse is going to continue to happen regardless. So I think we need to just get used to being uncomfortable, and we need to start telling our children to get used to being uncomfortable and to get used to making other people uncomfortable, because we are not here to please everyone else. We thought that kind of language and behavior in such young children could only happen either because they had seen an adult do it or because an adult had done it to them, says the mother who spoke to this newspaper. In the following weeks of November 2023, after alerting the school, the administration insisted, according to this mother, that it's just kids being kids and that they probably saw it on screens and would look into it. So essentially blaming the parents, which in some cases there might be some blame to lay there, right, if there's abuse happening in the home, but that is kind of an obfuscation of the entire situation, and kind of a blasé response to something that's pretty serious, I think. At home, the children began telling their parents about oral sex and abuse by parents in the cafeteria, the bathrooms, the classroom, at a place called the Lair, an area of the preschool playground with limited visibility. Some of these children even reenacted masturbation at home. That's when the families decided to report it. They spoke with the school again, where they were told repeatedly that it was impossible, that no male adult had access to this preschool playground or cafeteria, and that they would take measures such as locking the bathrooms. The investigation by Court Number 1 of Torrance concluded that there was insufficient evidence to consider the existence of sexual abuse against the minors proven, nor to bring charges against a specific individual, given the lack of specific details to identify the alleged perpetrator. And their conversations with their parents later included in the police reports the children mentioned at least 4 different adults. Their accounts repeatedly described someone as short, bald, and wearing a plaid shirt. Some also mentioned that one of them had keys to the different rooms. Here's a drawing by one of the children who reported the abuse at the El Vedad school, and it's like a scary person. And that's like a common thing as well when kids are young and they don't have full like mastery of the English language. They don't know all of the terms and all of the words. Maybe they don't even know the words for their own anatomy. Then it can be very, very difficult for them to ask an adult for help or to tell an adult what is happening. And many times children will draw what is happening. They will draw pictures that allude to the things that are happening behind the scenes, which is why in behavioral therapy, if a child is taken to a behavioral therapist, a lot of the time they will sit down with that child and like have them draw and like color pictures, because if a child is like maybe nonverbal, not particularly talkative, or if they simply don't have the language to describe what they're going through, this can provide a way to start to dig into actually what is happening. As the provincial court recalled in its ruling, despite one of the children recognizing one of the adults he was talking about in a video, so one of these children was shown a video and he said, yeah, that's the person, no attention whatsoever was paid to this evidence, which is just shocking to me. None of these men were called to testify, not even the one named by one of the children. Insane. The school administration maintained from the outset, and also communicated this to the civil guard, that this was impossible because the preschool teachers are all women and no men have access to either the playground or the preschool cafeteria. This newspaper has attempted to obtain a statement from Guillermo Rodriguez Cid, the school's director. However, he has declined to comment. As this matter is currently under judicial investigation, out of respect for the families who filed the complaint, the teacher who has been suspended in the entire school community, we believe it is best not to make any statements, he explained via email. So hold on, because I'm confused. Just a minute ago in this paragraph, they said that even though there's video footage of individuals that children were identifying as, yeah, that's the bald, scary man with the flannel shirt, the school, the spokesperson for the school, this Guillermo Rodriguez Cid, said, no, that's impossible. That's impossible because there aren't any male teachers here. Oh, but also don't worry about it because the teacher has been suspended. So do you have male teachers there or not? Because you can't not have male teachers and also be suspending teachers. One of these things is not like the other. Incoherent. The only person temporarily suspended by the school was a teacher identified by the children on March 8th, 2024, after the newspaper Las Provincias reported that the court had begun investigations. This was explained by the school principal, who had been alerted by families since at least November 2023, and a statement to the families. Quote, a month ago, a family that is no longer enrolled at the school informed us of a situation that allegedly occurred to one of their children involving a primary school teacher, and that they had reported it to the authorities. Although the reported events did not seem credible, we informed the Education Inspectorate and conducted a preliminary investigation. We have no evidence that these events occurred. However, given the concern that may have arisen, we have decided to temporarily suspend the teacher from his duties. So they did have a male teacher there. Even though up here, the school administration maintained that the preschool teachers were all women, and no men have access to either the playground or the preschool cafeteria. But in this next paragraph, they said that they decided to temporarily suspend the teacher from his duties. Liar, liars, pants on fires. Like, this is just bald-faced lying, right? The provincial court does not consider that there is a multiple concurrent and clear evidence of possible criminal acts that could be classified as sexual assault of children. In addition to summoning the aforementioned employees of the Opus Dei school as suspects, it has also ordered that 3 civil guard officers be questioned as witnesses. They are to explain the actions they took, particularly those related to the school's the school's submission of information about adults connected to the preschool children, given the school's omission of information when it submitted the staff list. In the order dated April 28th, in which the investigating judge of the Torrent Court agrees to reopen the case, she requires the school to identify, quote, 2 maintenance employees and the remaining males with and without access to the children's playground in the 2022-2023 and 2023-24 school years, as well as those mentioned by the witnesses. The order states, which this newspaper has accessed after the reprimand from the provincial court. This time, the court also requires the creation of a photographic dossier with the names of the people whose accounts the children refer to, and that a photographic identification be carried out in the Giselle chamber, a protected and specialized room for statements from minors. Meanwhile, 2.5 years have passed since the children recounted the alleged fellatio, masturbation, and abuse to their parents. The court has also summoned the parents of 5 children to testify as witnesses starting June 22nd. They too were never heard. That's what made us angry, that they don't want to hear from either the parents or the children, says the mother who spoke with this newspaper. According to investigative proceedings, the forensic medical reports concluded that one of the children did not possess, quote, the necessary cognitive abilities to clarify the facts, end quote. In another case, quote, his high social desirability could influence his testimony. And another, quote, does not provide clear information, and yet another, quote, gives an unreliable account. These are children, but like nothing that I read up here in paragraphs prior about the things that were actually being done to these children and where, and the things that they were doing to themselves after the fact and to each other. That's really, really clear to me from the reading of this article. And of course, I'm not there in the courtroom. I'm not examining the documents. I'm not hearing the sworn testimony, blah, 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 all necessary disclaimers to the side. As a member of the public reading this article, it's incoherent. It's incoherent to me that an investigating entity could take the statements that have been made by these children and then contrast them with the statements that have been made by Guillermo Rodriguez Cid and the school administration, and not see that there is clearly something amiss. And apparently the Valencian authorities agreed, because they are reopening this thing. Where am I? I'm right down here. According to documents obtained by El País, only 2 of the children were summoned for the Giselle interview. The mother claims that her lawyers requested it 3 times, and that the forensic psychologist who initially rejected the Giselle interview is the same one who ultimately conducted it. This is another aspect criticized by the provincial court. Quote, a case involving allegations of sexual assault against multiple children by easily identifiable individuals cannot be dismissed simply because, based on a psychologist's examination of 2 of the 11 children mentioned in the initial report, the expert states the account of one of these 2 children is, in her opinion, not credible, and that the other is very young and likely to be easily influenced, the court wrote in its ruling. I would really like to know a little bit about this psychologist and who they are affiliated with. You can refer to my recent catalog of work if you're wondering why I am questioning the presence of a psychologist and their affiliation with this entire thing. Needless to say, TLDR, there is a long and recorded history of Opus Dei as an organization using psychologists, psychiatrists who just happen to be Opus Dei members to, for lack of a better phrase, make it easier to control people on the inside. That is something that has happened. So when they mention that this psychologist's examination of just 2 of these children in an initial report that was like completely watered down and written off, it strikes me as interesting. And I would like to know more about this psychologist and who she is. Now, the investigating judge in Torrent has ordered that all the minors who have not yet been examined, which is 9 out of the 11, be examined in order to reopen the proceedings. In fact, she writes verbatim, it must be verified by a forensic psychologist other than the one who made the report in the previous proceedings is cited, appointing a more expert specialist given the special training required for the treatment, psychological care, and examination of children of such very young ages. I'm very glad. I've been following this case for some time since it started hitting the press back in like 2023. Very, very glad that this is being reopened and that they are taking another look at it and that the initial decision is not the final decision. And isn't that just like a tale as old as time with this organization, frankly. I mean, there is we could take the 2016 Tissier v Opus Dei case in France, for example, which I mentioned here just recently. And that case is one where initially the verdict was decided in favor of Opus Dei. Opus Dei was exonerated in 2011 after 11 plus years of like legal back and forth battling on the part of Catherine Tissier and 99 other former domestic workers. And in 2011, Opus Dei was initially exonerated, and you can still find articles floating around online, archived from back in the day, where Opus Dei talks about the fact that they were exonerated and there's no wrongdoing here in any way, shape, or form, and blah, blah, blah. But Catherine Tissier appealed, and in 2016, the court ruled in her favor. And Opus Dei, the organization, as well as individuals who were involved in the organization in the country where that court case originated, France, were required to pay several thousands of euros in fines. So I am happy that this is being brought forward again. I am happy that things are getting a second look and that it is not the complete end of the story for this case. Because to me, from my reading, based on everything that I've been reading over the last few years, and if you've been following along, you've probably been seeing some of these headlines as well, because I've been bringing them up. To me, it does not create the impression of a investigative process that is wholly transparent and honest, or placing the safety and well-being of the victims at the forefront. That is my perspective and opinion on it. Let me know your perspective on it as well, especially if you are over in Spain and you are seeing discussions about this situation, or there are other Opus Dei schools that have been accused of child abuse in Spain right now as well. Let me know what your thoughts on this entire thing are as well, because I would be interested in hearing it. And unfortunately, I have more to say on the subject of abuse in Opus Dei schools. I have a whole folder on my desktop right now that is full of articles about that very subject, because there have been things coming out over the last few months, and I kind of wanted to group everything together into like a subject video, just because there have been developments in some of these cases, and it's a very heavy subject just on its own, so I can understand why some people might not want to sit and listen to it. So I thought maybe putting it all into one video would be a good call, but I just have not had the time yet to do that, because I've been so incredibly busy with the next project that I am like in the trenches on right now that will be coming out. So that's in the back of my mind, something that I want to do. There have been developments and updates in some of these cases and new cases that have come out that I think are really, really important to discuss. And again, I want to emphasize that this is not just an Opus Dei school problem. This is not just a Catholic school problem. This is happening in schools all around the world. I am hearing from teachers. I am hearing from parents. It's getting really, really scary. And I truly think that the only way to combat it is to equip our children with informed consent and bodily autonomy as soon as possible. And there are so many wonderful and age-appropriate ways to begin doing that from really, really young ages, like even before children learn to fully talk. There are ways that you can teach them about their bodily autonomy and safe touch and all of these other things that I mentioned earlier. And so if you have children, please, I am begging you, if you have not already begun to get into this kind of thing and to start having these conversations with your children. I know it's uncomfortable and I know it's not fun, and I know that many parents don't want to do it, but it is so critically important. Please, if you have children, equip and prepare them for the world that they are going to be stepping into, not the world that you wish they were stepping into, not the world that you imagine that they will step into, not the world that you're sure you can create if you just instruct them the right way. No, the actual world that they are going to be stepping into. That is your responsibility. Your only responsibility as a parent. Please do it. Last but not least, I'm not going to read the full article, but I like to take note of when people pass away who are affiliated with these organizations that I research, just because I think it's worth noting. It's worth noting when people come and when they go. And in this case, this is someone who was involved with Opus Dei for a really, really long time. Father Junco, the first priest of the Priestly Society of the Holy Cross, passed away at the age of 100 last month. Says the church in Cadiz in the Campo de Gibraltar bids farewell to Father Juan Jose del Junco Domenech, who passed away this Saturday at the age of 100 after an exceptional priestly life that spanned 76 years. So he lived a really, really long life and spent a good majority of it as a member of Opus Dei, as a priest of Opus Dei, and working in his community. And so I think that's worth acknowledging when somebody spends their entire life in service of something like that. That's really, really significant. So rest in peace, perpetual light shine upon him. And yeah. With that said, that brings us to the end of our newsroom analysis for the month of May. Some very interesting articles. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback on everything that we discussed. The articles that stood out the most for me are the inside article about J.D. Vance's conversion to Catholicism, that because, again, like I said, it just ties some things together for me. The Newsweek article about Trump's idol and Elon Musk, I thought was very, very interesting as well and had some good insight. And as sad and depraved and disgusting as it is, I think the El País article was a really, really important one to bring up, again, just because of the implications for public safety and child safety and everything as well. They're really, really major. So thank you for sitting with me for this analysis today. I know that this was a long one, but like I said, I think there were some important things that we needed to discuss. So details to connect with me, to support my endeavors, are all linked down below. If you have a story or know someone that has a story that they would like to tell, you can send me an email at thedeepdiveproject@protonmail.com. If you or someone that you know is in need of mental health support, I have linked a variety of resources down in the description below. There might not be something that's perfect for you and your situation there, but maybe there's something there that can help get you on the right track. You can start doing a little bit of research based on what you read for your area and your region of the world and everything. Life is incredibly hard, but we do not have to go at it totally alone or unequipped. So if you need help, please reach out. With all that said, that is where I am going to conclude it for today. I must go back to the editing dungeon and keep working on this project. I am trying my damnedest to get it done by this coming weekend. That would be amazing, and I think I can do it. So I got to get back to that. And in the meantime, just remember, nolite te bastardes carborundorum. Don't let the bastards drag you down.